Hello. So I wasn't sure how to go about this, so I just kind of plugged in my computer to the TV here to have this as a visual aid to follow along, kind of like actual in class. So the parts of the brain and their functions, and my name is Ethan Hayes. So the parts of the brain, the first one starting with is the brain stem. That is the oldest and innermost The brain stem is the brain's oldest and innermost region. Its base is the medulla, which is a slight swelling in the spinal cord. This controls your heartbeat and your breathing. Some damaged patients, like in a vegetative state, have shown that we do not need any higher brain or conscious mind for our hearts and lungs to work. So those just kind of happen unconsciously without anything really needing to having thought for it. Just above the medulla sits the pons, which helps coordinate movements and control sleep. The brainstem is a crossover point between the two hemispheres, where most nerves from each side of the brain connect with the body's opposite side of the body. So the next part of the brain is the thalamus. On top of the brain stem is the thalamus. The section is the sensory control center, so this controls all of our senses. It receives information from all the senses besides smell, and then routes that information to the different regions of the brain that control our touch and our sense and everything like that. The next part of the brain is the cerebellum. The cerebellum enables nonverbal learning and skill memory. Also, it helps us judge time and manage our emotions, distinguish our sounds and textures. So our touch and whatnot comes from the cerebellum. It also coordinates voluntary movement, like when a hockey player is skating and shooting a puck. Now, all these functions happen unconsciously without any effort or real need to think about what we're doing. It just kind of happens. Between the older and newer section of the brain is the limbic system. And the limbic system contains the amygdala, the hypothalamus, and the hippocampus. So the amygdala is linked to aggression and fear. Researchers have figured out ways to control the sense of fear and aggression by electrically probing the amygdala. When they did so to a cat, when they electrically probed this part of the brain on a cat in a research study, the cat was ready to attack, but when they moved the electrode slightly, the cat cowered in fear from a mouse. So this has found a link between, and also they have found a link between criminal behavior and dysfunction of the amygdala. Just below the thalamus is the hypothalamus. Some natural clusters in the hypothalamus influence hunger, others control thirst, body temperature, and sexual behavior. The hypothalamus receives information from other parts of the brain and reacts accordingly to what the information is coming in for it. The hippocampus processes conscious, explicit memories and decreases in size and function as we grow older. People who lose their hippocampus to surgery or injury also lose their ability to form new memories of facts and events, so they cannot process and remember any new things anymore with the hippocampus being injured or removed. So the next part of the brain is the cerebral cortex, which has 4 lobes: the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. I'm probably butchering these words. Studies have found that when stimulating an arch-shaped region behind the frontal lobe, body parts on the opposite side of the brain would move. So if they stimulate this side of the brain, like the left side, in the left hemisphere, body parts on the right side of the body would move, and vice versa. So moving on, the parietal lobe receives incoming information from sensory images like touch and temperature. So when the cerebellum is receiving these different informations from sensing, like what you're seeing, it sends it to the parietal lobe to process it. and whenever we touch something and feel something. Any visual information like what we're seeing, so I kind of messed up on that last part, goes to the visual cortex in the occipital lobes, which is kind of like an optometrist, I guess, at the back of the brain, which I guess you could say we have eyes in the back of our brain because that's where it processes what we see. People with normal vision typically see dashes of light or color when this lobe is stimulated. And then lastly, we have the temporal lobe, which processes sound information. Most auditory information travels from one receiving ear to the opposite side of the brain in the auditory receiving area above the opposite ear. So yeah, that's the parts of the brain. Thank you. Have a good day.